Thank you, Mr. President. I was expecting to do this at noon today, but happy to do it at 11:30. We're going to have some representatives from Boise State showing up, I think, at noon, as well as Senator Chuck Winder. But today we're here to make a presentation to the Wyken Foundation, who is this year's beneficiary for the 19th annual ACHD Golf Charity. We started this process 2 years ago for this particular charity, but because of COVID, we had to delay it a year. And we had a successful golf tournament on 9/11 at Spurwing. First off, I'd like to recognize all the members of the golf tournament. I don't think they're all here, but it was a lot of work, as it always is. Special thanks to Stacy Spencer. She puts up with me and has to do with all the bookkeeping, which is a lot. But in any event, it was a successful golf tournament, and this year we raised $210,000 for the Wyken Foundation. No, we're good.
Make sure you tell when we're all grinning.
Grinning with our eyes.
Oh, you did? Good. We gave him the real money. If you don't mind, if you could stick around till noon, then we can get some pictures with the senator. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll begin with the real pre-commission agenda.
Mr. President, can I just make a comment? I appreciate the hard work that the staff has done in putting the golf tournament together. One of the things that I know there's sort of an expectation that commissioners show up and participate in the golf tournament, but you also have to realize that some of the same people who make contributions to the golf tournament may in fact be coming before us, and in our position as a quasi-judicial board, it's important that we maintain our impartiality, which is why I don't intentionally ever go out and find out who participated, who made contributions, and keep that separation as clear as possible. I know it's reported on our 990s, but it's important, and that's why I think there's going to always be some reluctance on the part of commissioners to be too involved in this because of the unique role we play as judges. And so it does not disparage the hard work that everybody did in putting this together, but understanding why, in fact, some of us feel it's important to maintain that separation, that there is no expectation, absolutely no expectation whatsoever, that someone who's made a generous contribution to the golf tournament who might in fact be doing business before this body. Thank you.
Well, the good news, Jim, is that in the 7 years I've been sitting here on days like this, and for all the events and discussions or whatever leads up to a golf tournament, I have never felt any expectations whatsoever for anything other than hopefully to be grateful for what happens at the end, which I am. Thank you. In beginning this pre-commission meeting, I would ask if any of the commissioners have any questions about the agenda.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I do have some questions on a few of the consent items. I don't know if we needed to go through that now or later.
Now is the time.
Let me see here. On the consent item number 2, I'm going to take this off. Consent item number 2, the construction bid for the 13th Street traffic calming. I was just wanting to know where I could go to see a full information on the scope of that project. So maybe that's a question I should just call staff directly
Good question.
to
Yes.
get all the
Yeah,
details.
we've had some meetings on that too, so
Mhm.
it's all available.
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, I'll have the staff contact you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Mr. President, I appreciate that, Mr. McKinney, because I've been on the commission as long as I have, I'm familiar with it, but I think it's important that we, just as a standard practice, just attach those so that we know what they are. Whenever we have a bid opening, we know what the scope is, because we're always gonna have this case where there's new commissioners.
The full scope too, because I've been following that as well, so if you could send that out.
Send it to all of us.
Okay,
Sorry,
great.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave, you
All
have a
right.
couple others.
Yeah, item number 5 on the consent agenda, the asphalt pathway paver machine. Just clarify, we've talked in the past about pathways and our multi-use pathways and so on. And I know that really it's been my suggestions that have led to some discussion of why do we, should we do our multi-use pathways in asphalt or concrete? They're, currently being done with concrete. Where do we use this asphalt pathway paver?
Mr. President, Commissioners, the majority of this use is on road repair, those sort of things, shouldering operations that erode during the winter. Now, in the past, based on requests from the City of Eagle and the City of Boise with commissions approval, we have used that pathway paver to repair areas on the green belt, and as a matter of fact, to extend the green belt operations as we went closer to Eagle. That was a project that the contractor dedicated the asphalt, the citizens dedicated signage, and the request to us was, could we provide our paver, which again is used for shouldering, small projects, that sort of thing, to help make that work. So it is multi-use. We do not use it specifically to go out and build sidewalks and those sort of things. That's done by the AGC.
Okay.
And this replaces the one that no longer works.
Right, okay. So it's basically a paver that's used for less than lane width paving operations.
We do not use the ACHD equipment or personnel to conflict with what the AGC does today.
Okay. All right, and then item number 8, and I know there's been some back and forth and discussion of the Bicycle Advisory Committee member appointments. I just wanted to make a comment on this one. I don't have any concern with the proposed appointments. But it's worth being aware as a commission that the Bicycle Advisory Committee has relatively few voices from the western and southern parts of the county. And that's something we need to keep in mind when we deal with recommendations from that committee. And I just wanted to make us aware of that so that we recognize that going forward. So those are just my questions. I don't have any concerns specifically about approving any of the items.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I was going to speak to the bicycle advisory appointments, if I could just add on with Commissioner McKinney's concern. A couple years ago, we started revamping, we added additional members, and we were taking a real close look at that proportionate spread of committee members throughout the valley. So it's kind of a process now. It's getting better. So we were aware of that and trying to address that. So I think I was looking at the list, we've made some good progress toward that, but that's very important to make sure we have everybody represented. The issue that I had, I just wanted to make sure we've got several that are expiring also in January. And so are we just going to pull from this pool of applicants, or are they going to go back out because that clock's ticking and that's just right around the corner?
Mr. President, Commissioner May, great question as always. The first 2 are immediate replacements. The number 3 is to fulfill the gentleman who's retiring in the late December, January timeframe. This has been flushed out with the BAC across the board. As you recall, there was another candidate that was going to fill that position. Unfortunately, for personnel reasons, that candidate could not come forward. So this has been based on your discussions in the past, and of course, what they're doing today has been fleshed out by the BAC, the staff, myself, across the board. We're comfortable with this group. That's why we're making the recommendation. But you are absolutely correct that as future openings do come up, there are no set candidates other than what we've done right now. It comes back to well, who's going to be nominated, making sure there's a balance on the BAC. I know that the chairperson is very good now about coordinating those back and forth. And now, of course, with our bicycle and pedestrian coordinator, she has a pretty iron hand on that.
Yeah, and Meg is doing a great job, and I'm glad we've got that position filled. And I'm glad to see that we had 34 applicants. I remember we got 16, we thought we'd hit the mother load with that. But I am concerned because I know in the past we've been kind of up against that deadline.
Mhm.
And so maybe we can have some sort of sunset in there that people that are on there, and whether they're deciding if they're going to continue, that maybe they have to do that 30 days ahead of time, or, you know, I just don't want us to not have those new people in place in January, so.
I'm sorry, Mr. President, Commissioner May, no, we share your thoughts on this, and it's always great to be looking out forward as opposed to having to react at the last minute with stuff. But there is no bench.
Well, good job with the BAC and Commissioner McKinney, we agree with you, and we've been working on that last couple of years to try to get that representation out there, so, awesome, thank you.
Alexis?
Yeah, Mr. President, looking at the bucket truck, and I forget, I'm a little confused with the 2022 versus 2023, and obviously they're different prices, but it just brought me to think, you know, how we apparently we didn't budget for it, but we need to have it. So, I mean, that sounds all fine and dandy, but it made me wonder about the status of the street sweeper and when that's going to come before us. So I wanted to see if you had any answer to that.
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, as a matter of fact, we are not waiting for the first quarter adjustment based on the supply chain issues that we're seeing right now, based on the lead times for getting the, I'm not going to refer to its other name, but the mini sweeper thing. I've already asked the team to move forward and order that piece of machinery, so it will be here before early spring, so we can, because it's a 4-month lead time to begin with. So that is already taken care of.
Perfect. And thank you, Jennifer. And then not to completely parrot what Commissioner May said, but I just was really impressed with the caliber of candidates for the BAC. I don't envy them in choosing who was going to be on there. And echoing Commissioner McKinney's concerns, I was just grateful to see 2 folks from my district specifically. So hopefully that we can have more balance moving forward, and there's always more voices to include, but I just wanted to commend the staff's work on supporting the BAC and our other advisory committees, and giving them the space to have such an amazing expert advisory group.
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, thank you. And again, this group coming up is truly amazing. You've got representations from all across all aspects for this, from planning and zoning to mountain biking alliances to the bike project out here. I mean, it's a very impressive group.
All right, are there any other questions or concerns or anything else about the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and turn some time over to the Director for Administrative Report.
I'll be very quick because I do have Sherwin coming in front of you to talk about Percy as we bring more staff members in front of the commission. First off, and probably most important, as you've been following the national news, China has been in it, India has been in it for financial issues across the board. Most recently, China severely cut their power production operations based on the interesting financial challenges they're now having with their own internal organizations. India has dramatically cut power production based on their inability to afford coal. They have mostly coal-fired plants out there. So why the heck am I talking to you about India and China? Well, it's directly impacted the Ada County Highway District. Yesterday, we received reports that due to the global supply chain crisis caused by China's control of power outages and some of the issues in India, it's going to be impacting our vehicle deliveries across the board. Jennifer and our fleet coordinator, Aaron, are working through this, something fierce. But right now, we do know that biggest known issue impact is the 4 dump trucks we have ordered. Peterbilt is cutting 50% of all orders now, and also indicating a 10% increase on cost. You know, we buy things via Piggyback to save the taxpayers dollars. We'll see how this all flushes out. We don't have specifics for you yet. We do believe that the 22 vehicles that we've ordered, to include patch trucks, central trucks, saw trucks, may or may not show up here on the time allocated, or may not show up at all, depending on how the global crisis on chassis and on chips and on concrete also coming out of China, which is kind of interesting. The 23 vehicles may not be impacted. You're going to look at a couple of those today, but we don't know. So that being said, the reason I'm sharing this with you is that I've directed that our staff cease any and all considerations of sales, or any and all considerations of market removal of any of our vehicles across the board. We are keeping everything we have. We are set well for winter. I have no concerns whatsoever on that, parts and that sort of stuff. But we are ordering, as I shared with you earlier, extra parts across the board. If we need one, we're ordering 2 to put up on the shelf and such. I had one person tell me that the best way to do this is to have the parts available so you can build a truck up on the shelf. But we have a lot of trucks too, but we can't do that and such. So anyway, just so you know, this is going to be a big deal as we keep going forward. And so that's the impact. MIG, we have scheduled their outbrief on our ADA compliance audit with you in executive session on October 20th. And such, we'll get the dates and stuff for you. And such, and I thank all of you for the participation on this, but this will be very, very interesting across the board. As a reminder, Chief Lee will be here on the 20th. Ada County Sheriff will be here on the 27th and such. And that so that you are starting to prepare. The Master Street Mine is going to go under a revision in 2022. Initial thoughts and briefings will be to you in the next couple of months. So that will be a big effort going forward on looking at the Master Street map. And that, with that, I did send out to you a proposed draft for the president's signature on the CICAC changes. I appreciate Commissioner Kenny, thank you, and such. I would like to be able to finalize that within the next day or two, so I can get it to the president and out to our partner agencies and stuff. So if you have any other additional comments, please let me know.
Yeah,
With that,
Mr.
I
President.
do, I'll
I
send,
do.
I
Yeah.
meant to send them to you.
Mr. President, I think I sent it in an email to everybody, which is that the notion that the expertise on the CICAC is a lot of expertise from those staff persons. In fact, the chair and the vice chair work in those positions, and that they continue serving as non-voting ex officio members, so we can continue to get the benefit of their knowledge and experience on the committee. So that's the only thing.
And I'm okay with that as long as they don't go over at the time.
I beg your pardon?
Yeah, I'm saying I'm okay with that. I'm in fact really okay with that. I'm just hoping that the individuals that replace them are not silent, and so that others who have been used to being there, who are no longer voting, may not be tempted or be given the opportunity to basically run the meeting.
Yeah.
Mr. President, Commissioners, okay, I will wait for your okay.
Yep.
And we'll go from there.
Yeah.
So, Commissioners, with that, we had a tremendous presentation update from Percy, and Sherwin attended that presentation. With that, I'd like to turn over the rest of my time to Sherwin, and you will see a different staff member each week coming up here to share some insights on all sorts of the organization going forward. With that, Sherwin.
Commissioners, just a few moments of your time before our 12 o'clock meeting here. The executive director of Percy, Mr. Donald Drum, on an annual basis, travels throughout the state to provide an update of the Percy program. legislation, the status of the Percy Fund, and so forth. So Anna, your accounting supervisor, and myself attended the most recent presentation last Friday by Director Drum. So there were a lot of good information from that meeting. So I'm just going to share a few of the most important topics that were discussed. So the main one is the performance of the Percy Fund. So the Percy Fund started the fiscal year, the state's fiscal year, which is July 1st of 2020 through 6/30 of 2021. So the start of the fiscal year, the fund was at $19 billion. At the end of the fiscal year, as of June 30 of 2021, it was at $24 billion. So that's a $5 billion increase in the Percy Fund, which is about a 28% return. Granted, historically, Percy has used a 7% return as a historic number to break even for the fund. So at 28%, as you know, the fund is now well funded. So in essence, the fund is 105% funded, as opposed to last year, it was about 87 billion or 87% funded. So what is the impact on our financial statements? Well, in our financial statements, last fiscal year, we recorded a $14 million net pension liability. So more than likely, this next fiscal year, when the statement is published, it will be dropping drastically. At this moment, we don't know exactly what those numbers are, but it should be much less than the $14 million.
And those numbers are based on the ages of our employees, when they're expected to retire.
Yeah, so I'll be going through a few more of those things here.
Yeah.
So the Percy, let's see here. The board priorities was discussed, and the top priority for the board is keeping the contribution rate steady for the members and also for the employers. So cost of living adjustments was also discussed. That's very important for our retirees as they want to maintain their purchasing power. So typically, if the CPI-U index is at 1% or greater, then based on state statutes, the retirees will receive a 1% COLA. But as of the end of the last fiscal year, the CPI-U was at 5.3%. And in fact, there was just news announced today that Social Security Administration is going to be implementing a 5.9% increase on Social Security benefits next year. So that's going to put some pressure on Percy, because the Percy board does have the ability to provide more COLA than the standard 1%. So just to give you an example, a 1% COLA costs the program $100 million. If Percy were to provide a 3% COLA instead of the standard 1%, the funded status of the program would reduce from 105% down to about 98%. So it's still well funded, because in the industry, an 80% funded pension is really a great pension program, and we are at 105%. So it's really amazing. So just real quickly here, the one important thing that I wanted to mention also is that mortality rates, it's set at 83 years old. For some reason, Idahoans are actually dying much earlier than the 83 years old mark. Don't know why, but they're going to be doing some studies on that. Active member experience. So as you know, there are currently two classes of membership. You have the general members and then the public safety members. So there's a possibility that the board may take a look at adding another class, which would be for district employees. The reason for that is that district employees are entering the workforce 2 years earlier. They're retiring earlier, And for some reason, teachers are living much longer, especially female teachers. So it's costing the program an additional 6 years of benefits just for teachers alone. So in essence, the general members are subsidizing the teachers. So there's a possibility that the board is going to be taking a look at adding a separate class just for teachers.
Sherman, you
Yes.
know if the actuaries are taking that in consideration now, or are they still taking into consideration when we thought that the Idaho life expectancy was longer?
They've actually just completed a 5-year comprehensive study, so that's where some of these decisions are coming from. So, the last thing, looking forward, Percy is basically, the director has stated that Percy is gonna have to do some tweaking to the program. As the fund is well-funded, obviously, there's gonna be a lot of talk about trying to give more to the retirees. Also, there's a possibility that there might be some other members that may like to change the rule of 90 to reduce it to rule of 80 and so forth. The other thing is the return to work program. As you know, it was approved by the legislature for teachers several years back. So there might be some other members that would like to be able to return back to work without affecting their current benefits. So a lot of things to look into in the future here.
It's a good report, a little more detailed than I expected. Thank you very much.
All
Sure.
right.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Sherman.
Sure.
Mr. President, can I ask just one question? In the meeting in which the director Percy was discussing all of this, a few minutes ago, Director Wong brought up concerns, with related to international economic developments. Does Idaho's Percy Fund have any exposure, or did they discuss any possible exposure to some of these international financial issues? Because I know it's been discussed in the news media a lot about pension plans and so on having that exposure. Do we have any?
Yes, Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, unfortunately, that wasn't discussed specifically. The focus on this meeting were to discuss the actuarial studies, the comprehensive study that was done, and also the status of the actual Percy Fund.
Okay.
But I would assume there would be some impact. That's why, the board will have to be mindful as to how much COLA they would have to give out, because their main priority is the sustainability of the Percy Fund and for all future employees that may be retiring.
You know, the way they've managed that money for a couple of generations now with dozens and dozens of fund managers that compete has been the primary, along with its funding itself, primary reason why it's one of the top and best funded pension plans in the United States.
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Thank you, Sherwin.
Thank you.
Sherwin, are you gonna stick around for the meeting? I just had a couple questions I wanted to ask you later.
Yes.
Okay. I'll catch you on the flip side.
All right, folks, it's time to begin our regular commission meeting. We will do so with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for one nation with liberty and justice for all.
Before we begin the meeting formally, I would like to introduce to you for just a moment, for his introduction, Senator Chuck Winder. If you'd come up for a second, I know you're going to reintroduce the Waiken Foundation, and we'll probably have a couple more pictures. Then we'll begin our meeting.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, may I take this off
You
and
bet.
speak with you? Okay. I'll try not to touch anything, but just what a privilege it is and a pleasure it is to be here today to receive this check from ACHD and all the people that participated in the tournament a few weeks ago. It's amazing the contributions that your employees and your vendors have made to our community. And for those of you who don't know about Waiken, it's an organization that was started locally to help men and women veterans transition from active duty service into private life again. Most of them have significant disability in one way or another. We've had amputees, we've had blind people that have been blinded by explosions. These people are amazing patriots and, in my opinion, the real men and women heroes of our generation. And they can say the World War II generation was the greatest generation, but if you look at these men and women, I think you have to consider them among that same generation of warriors, of people that serve their country and are willing to give all so that you and I can enjoy our freedom. So I just want to thank you again from the bottom of my heart, and I mean it sincerely, for this wonderful contribution to help the men and women that served our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. We'll come down for a couple more pictures then.
Also, Coach, can you come on up too? We got a little check presentation for you as well. So if I can, some of the money that we raised, we every time we do it, we get the assistance of the Boise State men and women's golf team, and Coach Dan Potter here, he serves up his best golfers to be auctioned off. Sometimes we have a commissioner. This year we did. Commissioner Pickering, thank you for participating. In the past, we've had Commissioner Woods and Commissioner Sarah Baker have also participated, which is a great event during the auction this year. We're happy to make a donation to the men and women's golf teams in the amount of $7,950. So thanks, Coach.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry, our pleasure. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could have 10 more seconds.
You bet.
I was remiss in not thanking Steve Price and the director for their efforts bringing this forward over the years. And my penalty this year was I had to play with Steve, but I got to play with Commissioner Pickering's husband, and he was a great golfer. So just want, again, thank you. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Director Wong. Can't thank you enough. So.
The real punishment would be
have
if
a
you
great
had to
meeting.
play with me.
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah. And here I thought that the reason that Sherwin was asked to speak today was because today was the day that my very first Social Security deposit was put in my account, but guess not. Okay, we will begin our meeting with a motion to accept the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We'll go into the consent agenda, which the items there are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion, and there will be no separate discussion on these items unless the commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case that item would be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless otherwise noted. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries, and we will go therefore into our regular agenda, again, which are all action items. And the first item is resolution number 2367, which is the vacation exchange of a public right-of-way at Boise Park and Recreation, North Glenwood Street. And this is a public hearing. We will hear from Dave Serdar, our right-of-way supervisor.
Thank you, President Goldthorpe, Commissioners. For the record, David Serdar, right-of-way supervisor for Ada County Highway District. As stated, this is a public hearing and decision briefing for a vacation on Glenwood Avenue in Boise. ACHD received a vacation application from the City of Boise for the Parks and Rec Department. There are no fees associated with this because of the interagency fee waiver agreement between Boise City and Ada County Highway District. The vacation area is approximately 0.115 acres, and the dedication area is 0.050 acres. This is a vicinity map of the location. As you can see, Cole Road is just off to the east of the vacation, and the kind of farm is the future park, is the park. This site shows a more close-up view of the location. The red is the vacation area, the green is the dedication area. As can be seen, this is a terminus for Glenwood. And it's kind of a turnaround. This design was requested by the applicant and reviewed by Development Services and approved as a design. As stated before, this vacation falls within the terms of the interagency fee waiver agreement between Ada County Highway District and Boise City. Once again, therefore there is no fees associated with this vacation. It is staff recommendation that the commission adopt and sign resolution 2367 as applicant has completed all staff and commission requirements. I will remain standing for any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Serdar?
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yes, and I assume, Dave, there's somebody from the city who can explain this to me. But when we brought this up a month or so ago to schedule this date, I pointed out that I need to be persuaded because I saw absolutely no reason for the dedication. I can see the vacation, but the dedication doesn't make sense to me. Glenwood Street's way too wide at this point anyway. It was designed as a wide street that was originally going to connect, and adding even more dedication to make that big turnaround. It's a local road. It's basically an extension of Long Drive. So I saw no justification for us to accept the dedication of that piece that is in green on the map. So if the city could come forward and explain to me why they need that dedication. I did put everyone on notice when this came up.
Let's go ahead first and get any other questions for Mr. Serdar. I was going to ask the city to come up anyway, and that can be the first thing they address.
I had a similar question to Commissioner Hanson. It was the same question.
One?
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
I do have one question. I'd like to go back, and I think it would be helpful both for me and for the public generally to, this may be going back into ancient history, but to understand the reason it appears that Glenwood was originally, that stub that we're talking about was originally intended to cross the Spalding Ranch property and connect and to make a through street there from Glenwood coming up the hill and avoid that Cole Road, Mountain View kind of jog, putting arterial traffic on a residential street. Can anyone explain to me why that decision was made not to push Glenwood through? And I mean, I know this may be ancient history, but we've still got that Mountain View Cole Road situation to deal with, And it's a little bit confusing to me why this looks like it was considered a good solution at one point and then abandoned for some reason.
Thank you, Commissioner McKinney, Mr. President, members of the commission. My name is Justin Lucas, for the record, Deputy Director of Planning and Project Management here at the Highway District. Commissioner McKinney, you're correct. There was a long-standing plan that was, originally conceived probably 20 to 25 years ago to extend that segment of Glenwood and have it connect up to the intersection of Glenwood and Goddard, Mountain View, right in that area. When the city of Boise acquired this property and decided to locate a park there was lots of discussions about the possible extension of Glenwood and what about that plan that we had. And this was then discussed as part of a master street map update and also as part of ACHD's CIP process. And the commission at that time determined that they would no longer like to extend that street. So that's an action that has already been taken by a previous commission.
Okay. Well, then as a follow-up, in looking through the staff report on this, it appears that the Spalding Ranch parcel, and this may be the future plans that the city of Boise has for it, is intended to be developed as a park, and it'll have an entrance further north on Cole Road from this Glenwood Street connection that will move east-west. I guess it'll go to the west and connect to Glenwood, where it is in that residential neighborhood. Is that correct?
Yes, I think we have someone from the city of Boise here who can probably describe the layout and the connectivity anticipated within the park. But yes, there are multiple access points anticipated to the park from the existing street network that's out there.
Okay, and presumably when those are finally proposed, we will, ACHD will have to approve those connections and so on.
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, no, I believe that's all been approved, and I'll look over to Gary. We had an action on this application already, so there's it was attached to the vacation staff report. There was a development services staff report that described the conditions related to those access points, which is one of those conditions was what was before you today, this terminus of Glenwood and the vacation/dedication that you see before you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Dave or Justin? In that case, I'll invite the applicant to come forward. I know you got at least one question to answer.
Greetings, President Goldthorpe, members of the commission. My name is Trevor Kessner. I'm with the city of Boise.
You have to either really speak up or take down your mask.
Commissioners, I'm Trevor Kessner with the City of Boise Parks and Recreation Department. I am the applicant for this vacation dedication. So I believe the question is why are we dedicating additional right-of-way here? We proposed the dedication because it's standard district policy to provide a cul-de-sac turnaround when a street terminates. I'm assuming this was what we were told, that the district standard policy was to provide a standard cul-de-sac turnaround when the street terminates. So we were just dedicating this additional right-of-way to provide a complete cul-de-sac turnaround per district policy. So that was my understanding. So Trevor, the request was made by ACHD that you didn't make this dedication. Obviously, it's not a terminated street. It's just an extension of what is that called? Yeah, it's just, it's not a dead end. So the request was made by ACHD. You didn't initiate it? Commissioner Hanson, we just provided the dedication as the design for a complete cul-de-sac turnaround because that's something that we assumed that the district would want to see at the end of this roadway. So we're happy to not dedicate it if. Oh, good. Well, that's, I don't think the district does not want it. Yeah, because it's obviously not a cul-de-sac. It's a street that just extends onto the. Yeah, we just provided this design as a kind of a standard cul-de-sac turnaround for folks if they decided they wanted to come in off of Glenwood
and decided they didn't want to go out to Long Drive or into the neighborhood, or didn't want to go to the park, they can just turn around and move themselves right back out the neighborhood.
You hit the nail on the head. Glenwood Street, from my view, was designed and built that way as a larger through street, what we call collectors. It's not going to function that way anymore. So we still have to deal with the super wide entrance so that it turns into a local street, or the best way of accessing the Spalding property. And so I think actually the dedication defeats the purpose of addressing the shift of that little piece of Glenwood away from being a big old collector that would have otherwise in the past, when we presumably initially extracted the right of way years ago with the assumption of making that collection. So you clarified the assumption was made and placed on here, but you'd be fine if there was no dedication.
Commissioner Hanson, we are happy to present another design that shrinks this up a little bit.
Great.
We kind of
Probably
approached this as thinking that the district wanted a large enough place for a fire truck to turn around and get out of the neighborhood, but we're happy to revise the design so we don't need to dedicate any additional right-of-way.
Thanks. I think if you speak to your fire department, they're much more interested in connectivity than in big spaces to turn around. Obviously, a fire truck's not going to turn around there. They would just keep going through the neighborhood. Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right, any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Because this is a public hearing, I'll ask if there's anyone else on Zoom or in the audience that would like to address this. Yes, if you...
Only a gentleman in the audience.
Yep, if you could come forward and give us your name and address, and you have 3 minutes. You bet. Off is fine.
Okay. My name's Wayne Ritchie. I live on the corner of Cole and Mountain View, 4137 Mountain View. And I just got a heads up a little bit ago that you're having a meeting concerning Spalding Ranch. And so I took off work real quick and came down. This is probably the 3rd or 4th meeting I've been here concerning Spalding Ranch. Every single time, well, it's the city's problem. They're doing a park now. It's not in Ada County's hands anymore. That's what's always happened. I've been to 3 or 4 parks and city meetings concerning Spalding Ranch. Oh, you'll have to talk to ACHD. They're the ones in charge of putting Glenwood through.
Are your questions about this piece of road?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Years ago, when they redid Mountain View at Cole and Glenwood, the neighbors were all promised that Glenwood would go through someday. And it really does need to go through.
And that's not an option.
Is it that impossible for that to happen?
Well, we're not going to be able to address it at all today. What we're talking about here today is this particular vacation and dedication.
For Spalding Ranch?
No, for this street.
Okay, for...
Where you see the colors, the green and red. Yes.
Myself and all the people that live around there really, really believe that Glenwood at some point needs punched through. It was promised to be punched through. That road is already called Glenwood. Up at Mountain View and Glenwood, the road is already wide enough. The street light is already there. That section from Mountain View and Cole to Glenwood and Mountain View is one of the most dangerous quarter miles in the city. I know the city wants a glorious park, and for whatever reason, people such as myself that live around there have been put on the back burner. Okay, the last city Zoom meeting that they had, nobody could chime in on a Zoom meeting. There was like 30 of us in that neighborhood that showed up to all these meetings, wanting, we really believe Glenwood needs punched through. It makes sense. It was promised. It is a traffic nightmare there. But because somebody at the city wants to put in a glorious park, it's all been put on the back burner.
And
Okay.
it was actually decided several years ago now.
I know, and we've been pushing back since several years ago.
Okay.
And we've been blown off, we've been put on the back burner. Eventually, that section of Mountain View between Cole and Glenwood, it's already a bottleneck. It's already horrible traffic.
Can I ask you if you and the neighbors were here the night that it was decided not to put that road through?
No. And like I say, before that and since then, we've been at several meetings and we have been blown off.
Okay, well,
Completely
nobody was blown off at that meeting, and we had a full-blown public hearing on that.
Okay. No, we weren't, I wasn't at that meeting. I've been to several others.
Okay.
And like I say, every meeting that I've been to with Ada County, well, you'll have to bring it up with the city. Every single city meeting that we have been to, well, you'll have to take it up with Ada County.
That part is really kind of unfortunate, maybe even disturbing, because they own it, and they were, yeah.
And the reason it got put on the federal, it was a land swap with a realtor way back in the day. We've been watching it that long. I mean, it was, it's on the Federal Historic Register now and all that stuff, but it was a land swap, plain and simple, And I really believe, and all the neighbors around there believe, it was just somebody at the city wants to build a really cool park. The fact that we have a horrible traffic congestion there, well, that's not important. We want a park. I've been told you can't run because it's really old.
That's the first I've heard about that, and I've been
But
here
it's
for all
safe
the
enough
hearings.
to be a classroom, So, just to let you know, the neighborhoods around there, we've been blown off. It was promised to go through. Who remembers, who's been here long enough to remember when they punched Curtis up through and made it a 4-lane road? Do any of you remember that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Do any of you remember when ACHD caved into the neighborhood and made it a 2-lane road?
Oh, yeah.
And the very next year, engineers should build roads, not neighborhood associations, not park department people, not city council. Engineers should build roads. Glenwood needs punched through, and everybody knows it. But instead, we're getting this glorious little park.
Well, I think we understand where you're coming from, sir.
Okay.
We really do.
And it's been frustrating. This is not my first meeting,
Right.
And I wish I could follow it more and was up on it more back in the day. And a lot of us were here, Sorry I wasn't at that meeting. I've been to several others. And like I say, Ada County said, oh, that's the city's problem. You go to the city, oh, that's Ada County's problem.
Okay, can we ask if any of the commissioners have any questions for you?
Any questions?
I guess not.
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
We appreciate it. I just wanted to say, I do remember Mr. Ritchie coming in, and you were here last fall, as I recall. Yeah, I do remember that. And you live right there on the corner, don't you? Right.
Accidents on the police every day. It is dangerous. Ask the Boise police.
We appreciate you being here today. Thank you, Mr. Ritchie.
All right, folks, is there anyone else who would like to address this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and the matter is now properly before the commission for motion and discussion.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I would move to adopt resolution 2367 only to the extent of vacation and not the dedication. And I would attach a request to the city of Boise to rename that little teeny piece of Glenwood Street I assume, does the city of Boise, anyway, that's my motion.
Second.
Mr. President,
Yes.
just as a kind of a discussion issue, it appears, if I understand Commissioner Hansen's concerns, that he's saying, there really doesn't appear to be a need for a turnaround at this location, that instead it should just be a left turn. And if so, even the vacation part, you notice has that curvature that's designed to accommodate a cul-de-sac there. And so it would appear that if we're going to eliminate the dedication portion, that the size and shape of the vacation portion would also change accordingly.
Well, if we change that vacation, then we would have maybe a 10 square foot piece of property that ACHD still owned, and
And Mr.
might
President.
as well give it all, not just a portion.
And Mr. President, I just want to echo Commissioner Hansen's, that this is in my district and I'm really familiar with this street and it is really, really wide. You might not be able to really tell from the map, but there's plenty of room for a 3-point turn if they can't make it all the way.
Right, no, I understand. I'm agreeing with that.
Okay.
Because if you look at the red shaded portion, if we can go to that slide that shows the two different portions, the dedication portion the green section has that big curvature, but you notice the vacation portion also has a large chunk out of it.
Sure.
Which if we're just allowing that road to be a left turn, that's not needed. The vacation section could be larger and simply come up straight to the right-of-way line for the adjacent, for the T intersection.
Gotcha.
So if we're going to make a change to get rid of the dedication, it makes sense to me that we would also change the size and shape of the vacation as well, so that this could then be just turned into a left turn.
I'd probably ask for a little bit of an explanation from Justin, maybe, because it would appear to me that rather than make the vacation larger, we could make it smaller and still have that straight line.
So I just say, Dave, I thought of that, and we'd have to republish this whole process. And so later on, if the city wants to come back and say, can you vacate slightly more, they may or may not. But it seems to me we're gonna have to republish anyway if we do that. So we might as well vacate what we have. City can go ahead and plan, and it would be a smaller vacation in the future, but.
And I think that would be a good question. We ought to ask Mr. Sir.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't
thoughts
affect
on
their
that.
access the way that this would.
Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you. Before you today is that red area and that green area. Obviously, the discussions are that vacating the vacation area and not having the city dedicate the green area. Understand where you're going in that direction. At this point, we don't have the ability at this public hearing to modify the size or shape of the area in red, the vacation area. This is a request that comes from the city. We're acting on the request that was consistent with previous action. So if you did want to do that, I think there are two options in which Commissioner Hansen very well described, which are go ahead and move forward with vacating that area in red. And then if there's further area that can be vacated, it would be a separate vacation application, or remand this back to staff, and we could go back and work with the city of Boise and modify this and then bring it back with a different configuration if that's the commission's decision.
Which approach would be easier?
Yeah, that's the second.
I think, yeah.
Just
Yeah, I can't
do the
speak for
vacation
this.
that's presented and do something else later if needed.
Commissioners, it's really,
He said remand it back.
it's at your discretion. If you want to get this all taken care of in one motion or action, you would need to do it by remanding that back to staff.
Here come the judge.
And then we got further clarification.
Thanks, Justin.
Mr. President, Commissioner Steve Price, General Counsel for the record. Well, it never goes easy, does it? But I think Justin's spot on as well as Commissioner Hansen. But the only other thing that I think needs to be addressed is the commission would have to grant a waiver of policy on the turnaround. that was attached as an exhibit as a requirement, my understanding. And so with that motion, if you wouldn't mind, include that as you're waiving district policy as to the requirement of a roundabout and request that it would be a T intersection.
So that's the, Mr. Price, that's the confusion, because a
Yeah.
turnaround is at a dead end. And this isn't. This is just a continuation of Long Drive. And so it's like, why would we even have to worry about it? Because it's not a turnaround. And actually, the next step really needs to be to redesign the entrance to this old North Glenwood so that people don't enter it unless they're intending to go to a destination right there, Spalding Ranch or one of those neighbors, and not under the assumption, which I think some people may do now, is turning onto it and thinking Glenwood starts there, which it doesn't.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, I agree, but I thought, maybe Gary can help, but I thought that the requirement of turnaround was a previous commission action on a development application that's attached to the application. I think Mr. Serdar referenced.
And
it.
I'd
That's
say
the only
just add
thing.
that to the motion to say we'll
That's
waive
all I'm trying to
whatever
clear up, is to make sure
previous
that,
Got his hand up.
confusion over
Mr. President,
whether we require a
Commissioners.
turnaround or not. That's
Yes,
all.
Gary?
Sorry, if I could clarify that. It was a staff level approval. The cul-de-sac policy was referenced because the city had proposed the cul-de-sac. One is not necessary there if we want to ask them to redesign it as just a 90-degree turn onto the other street. That
And that can be done at
perfectly
a
fine
staff
with our
level.
policy, yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Good.
that makes sense, because you look at the geometry here, and it doesn't strike me that the policy would require a turnaround in this location.
It's a 90-degree turn.
Yeah. So I have a question,
Yes.
of the motion maker. Would you be willing then just to have it go back, remand it back to staff, make those changes, come back, and then we're done with it?
Well, we'd have to go, because it's a vacation, we'd have to go through and pay for another process, set a date. And so what I'd just as soon is just get this out the door, leave it up to the city if they really want to, because it's such a tiny portion. And actually what they might want to do is combine that with vacating some of the land down there at the entrance to Cole, and combine those two so that the property owners on Cole would then benefit from that. Because that entryway to, what is it called? I keep forgetting. West Long really is, it doesn't justify this kind of width. So I think we just go forward, vacate this piece, and if they want to come back and tweak, because I know there's still some issues that need to be done with Spalding Ranch as the Parks Department develops it. They can come back and say, we need a little piece here and a little piece there. We can take care of those little pieces later, but in the meantime, they can go ahead and plan.
So with the
We don't have to
expectation
pay
that
for
they'll probably be
another,
coming
yeah,
back anyway.
we don't
right?
have to pay for another hearing until it's done.
Justin?
Justin, you look like you're,
Just here to answer any further questions, Commissioners. I did want to just clarify the entrance off of Cole onto Glenwood is going to be modified already with an active ACHD project. So this came up previously. We have some maintenance work on Cole Road, and some sidewalk also, and we're going to significantly modify the curb radius and the other things happening at the connection of Glenwood and Cole. So that's already in process. And when it comes to the red area, the vacation area, it's really at your discretion, whether you want to remand it back. I talked to the city. They're not in any huge hurry, so I think they're good either way.
Great. Oh, quick question, Justin. They decide on street names. We don't, right? Is that yeah, that's what I thought.
Correct.
Okay, so a request to have them change the name is appropriate. Okay.
And would staff have a preference of which approach we take?
right.
Remand the whole thing, or approve part of it today?
I'll be honest, if the commission wants to ensure that the remainder of that right-of-way is vacated as per this new plan to have a T intersection, there's no mechanism you have to require the city to come back and do the rest of that vacation. So it really puts the ball in the city's court on whether they choose to do that or not. And I don't know if they will. So if that's really something the commission is wanting to see and to act on for sure, the only way to ensure that would be to remand this back, have the city redo their vacation area plan, remove the cul-de-sac, and then act on it all at the same time. This two-phase approach can work. It's just, it really puts the ball back in the city's court to decide if they would like to do that or not.
Makes sense.
Yep.
All right, before we vote on this motion, is there a substitute motion or any other comments?
Yeah, Mr. President, I would move that we remand this vacation matter back to staff to make changes consistent with our discussion here today.
That is a substitute motion, correct?
As a substitute motion, yes.
Is there a second?
I would second that. I think that just makes sense. Speaking to Justin, saying that there are no guarantees coming back. This way we just get it done, take care of it, and then go forward.
Okay, we will vote therefore on the substitute motion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Then the motion carries. All right. Now that concludes the substitute motion carried. And that concludes the regular portion of our commission meeting. We have public communications. Is there anyone here who would like to address us on anything at all? Seeing nothing, we will go ahead and, whoops, just a minute. Here comes Steve. He wants to address us on public communications.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. I didn't get a chance to introduce our new staff attorney who comes to us from the Idaho Transportation Department. Renee, you want to come up? And you might give the commission a little bit of your background. She's has lots of experience in transportation-related areas. She's been with the Texas transportation entity as well as ITD. She's got lots of experience, so we're really happy that she's here. She's going to be a great addition, and we look forward to working with her. So, Renee, you want to?
Sure. Welcome.
Hello, President and Commissioners. As you said, my name is Renee Hollander-Vogelpol, and I did spend about 7 years with the Attorney General's office in Texas, working for the Transportation Department and mainly condemnation. Moved here in 2014 with the AG's office, doing the same thing for Idaho Transportation Department. And I've started on Monday with ACHD, and I'm very happy I'm here, and I look forward to working with each of you.
Well, we're happy to have you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, then we have Paul Daigle. He's got something to address.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Paul Daigle, Chief of Staff. I would like to introduce our new Chief of IT, our new IT Manager, Andy Miller. We stole him from ISP. He was the cream of the crop. He did a great job in all the interviews. So everybody gets a get out of jail free card with ISP now that we've hired Andy. So
Well, he had the right haircut for ISP.
So
Welcome.
welcome.
I'm honored and excited at the same time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Welcome. Is there anything else anyone would like to say? All right, the meeting is adjourned, and we'll take a few moments to set up for our work sessions.
Was that unanimous or 3-2?
I referred to it as 4-1.
4-1? I just like to get it over with. So maybe after then we can.
awesome.
So, yeah, I'll tell my side.
We need to start with a little bit of housekeeping. The housekeeping is this: speak up. We are receiving numerous comments. Well, actually, the comments have been the only two people they can hear are me and Jim.
What?
Serious.
You can't hear me?
Serious.
What?
So those of you who have had children or have children, pretend like you're speaking in a projected tone of voice and you mean what you're saying. The rest of you, look up at the microphone. Oh.
Oh, I'm okay. I can speak up loud. No, I'm fine.
Well, yeah.
I'm fine.
What a guy.
Can anyone tell us exactly what a microphone is?
Green lights.
Little white thing sticking down.
Stacy was saying it's the green lights.
The panel with the green light.
There's one right
Over there. Oh, well, no wonder they can hear you. That's cheating.
They can hear me and I'm not hearing it. Okay, we're going to begin. Now, just so you know, if we get word through Stacy that people can't hear us, we're gonna have to move back up there.
Okay. Okay, Stacy.
Hey, Chloe, please.
That's actually being worked on.
He's already left.
Okay, we will begin our work sessions with the 8th Street Bikeway concept study presentation, and that will be from Brooke. Take it away, Brooke.
All right, well, good afternoon. For the record, Brooke Green within Projects and Planning. All right, I'll start over. No problem. Well, good afternoon. As I mentioned, Brooke Green within Projects and Planning. It's a privilege to be before you to provide you an informational briefing regarding the 8th Street Bikeways concept study. CCDC and ACHD has partnered together to work toward a concept study for 8th Street. Both CCDC and ACHD has evaluated 8th Street as a premier connection between the Greenbelt and Boise's North End. Because 8th Street threads several different jurisdictions, ACHD and CCDC concluded that it'd be best to tackle this project together to lessen any confusion with the public. In today's presentation, I'll provide a little background and of our segment that ACHD is responsible for, and then pass it off to Zach with CCDC. Well, he'll cover his segment that CCDC is addressing. The planning area before you starts at Straight Street and goes no further north than Union. However, there are two different project limits. The red is CCDC's project limit, and the blue is ACHD's project limit. And you've got Franklin that splits the two. This is the future ACHD Franklin Bikeway. So Franklin Road itself has already been identified as a bikeway connection. Project objective: provide a low-stress bike connection between Boise's North End, Boise Greenbelt, which reflects ACHD's commitment to the newly adopted LTS guidelines. Both ACHD and CCDC are in different stages as we approach this project. ACHD, our objective is to complete a concept study, a seamless transition between CCDC and ACHD's projects. In addition, it's to complement existing facilities on 8th Street, south of Straight Street. CCDC is at the stage of concept design, based on previous planning and concept work. Their project includes streetscape, transit, and utility components. ACHD oftentimes will conduct a concept study first and then we'll fold over into concept design. It is our intention that we'll be able to blend the two as we move forward, hopefully into construction. 8th Street Bikeway concept study will build upon previous planning work and stakeholder outreach efforts to develop a concept alternative that is appropriate for the 8th Street corridor. ACHD has conducted several outreach efforts in preparation for this plan. In 2016, we went out to the North Boise Neighborhood Plan, where bike facilities or traffic calming on 8th Street from State Street to Union Street was listed as a medium priority. Back in 2018, we went back to visit with them once more. We completed the addendum to the Bike Master Plan, where 8th Street was identified as a bike corridor. 2020, City of Boise highlighted this within their integrated 5-year work plan request. Just recently, 2021 ACHD adopted our Livable Streets performance measures, and 2022 ACHD and CCDC realized going into this next year the importance of working on this project together. CCDC has already performed their concept work with their previous phase, and I'm going to hand it over to Zach here in a moment, who's going to speak primarily about the efforts of 8th Street, the whole corridor, efforts that have already been completed, their segment, and then he'll fold it back over to me where I'll conclude with our next steps and some of the trade-offs as we pursue this 8th Street Bikeway project.
Thanks, Brooke. Good afternoon, Mr. President, Commissioners. As Brooke mentioned, I'm Zach Pietmeyer, Capital Improvements Project Manager with CCDC. It's really great to be here. CCDC is excited to be able to partner or have the opportunity to partner and work side by side with ACHD on another phenomenal project for our community. It's well known that 8th Street is an important bike and pedestrian corridor providing access to a host of significant destinations in and near downtown. ACHD, the city, and CCDC have each spent considerable amount of effort over the last several decades establishing this as a primary corridor connecting BSU, the Greenbelt, downtown, and the North End. Most recently, CCDC partnered with ACHD on the construction of 2 blocks of improvements between Bannock and State. This latest phase of improvements included a complete reconfiguration of the 8th Street cross-section, durable concrete paving, sidewalk and streetscape improvements to enhance the pedestrian realm, and the all-ages bike network extension up to State Street. The commissioners may recall from presentations in late 2019 and early 2020 that this project was actually originally intended to extend 3 blocks from Bannock to Washington in order to get cyclists across State Street, which is often viewed as a mobility barrier. Unfortunately, at that time, CCDC's urban renewal district did not extend north of State Street, and so CCDC could not participate in the design, outreach, and construction of improvements on that 3rd block. Hoping to team with ACHD on some low-cost interim improvements for that 3rd block, the city proposed the concept that is shown on the right side of the screen. It included a shared northbound lane and a at-grade buffered southbound bike lane established primarily through the use of signage, striping, and some raised or tubular markers. Ultimately, that concept for all 3 blocks was approved by the ACHD Commission in January 2020, but this 3rd block was never fully designed or constructed. And that may actually not be the worst outcome, since the improvements proposed back then would most likely not meet the design guidelines or design intent behind the new ACHD Livable Streets performance measures. One of the other positives that did come out of that previous effort was the feedback we received, both from the city leadership, the city's BAC, and the public, some of which are still relevant for this current project. The first one is that 8th Street already has a number of different configurations for bikes and vehicles, so try not to introduce something wholly new if you can. The northbound facility should probably aim for something a little more protected than a Sharrow. And taking the bike facilities to Washington, yeah, it gets you across State Street, but it doesn't really extend far enough to make a meaningful connection in the east-west direction, which is why we are looking at Franklin as our northern terminus. Fast forward to late 2020, CCDC's West Side Urban Renewal District was amended to include 2 additional blocks of 8th Street from State to Franklin, in large part because of the input that we received from the public. And now CCDC has design funds in 22 and construction in 23 to complete those facilities. In addition to bike infrastructure, we'll also be looking at significant streetscape enhancements, some transit improvements, and potentially some undergrounding of overhead utility lines. This summer, CCDC initiated a concept effort led by Kittleson Associates, who is scoped to take the project basically through concept development, some initial public outreach, and selection of a preferred alternative. To date, that design team has completed topo survey of the corridor. We've done significant project outreach with stakeholders, namely property owners on the corridor, including 3 properties which are at various stages of planning for redevelopment. The consultants have completed some traffic operations and parking analyses and are beginning to take a look at some cross-sectional options. In the midst of this preliminary work, we learned that ACHD was planning to program some improvements further to the north. So CCDC hit pause on the project for a brief period of time so that both projects could align schedules and function more as a seamless project. So although they are separate projects funded differently, through different agencies, we collectively agreed it just makes sense to approach this as a single cohesive project, particularly as it relates to going out to the public and selection of a preferred alternative. And I'll let Brooke talk about the northern section.
Thank you, Zach. And yes, we graciously appreciate CCDC's pause as we catch up with them. Similar to what CCDC highlighted in their segment, our segment from Franklin up to Union, we anticipate, of course, the bike facility improvements. Currently, we sit at an LTS 3, and to be able to attain an LTS 2 or better is our goal. Our concept effort will certainly include some additional stakeholder outreach as well as public outreach in concert with what CCD has already completed. We have 3 alternatives we intend to bring back before you. Primarily up until January, we'll be in front of you with those 3 alternatives. And of course, come springtime, we'll be back before you regarding the selection and approval of a preferred alternative. However, before we get to that stage, it's important that we examine what are the potential trade-offs. We are constrained with our actual curb to curb as it pertains to this location. From State to Franklin, CCDC has already conducted some analysis on what constraints that they have. Well, from Franklin to Union, we're just about to start. Some potential trade-offs that we're considering as we move forward is parking, number of travel lanes. Within our segment, we have 2 signals, so we're going to have to explore those for the inclusion of bike signals. We have several commercial driveways and of course the streetscape. So as we move forward into this analysis in the coming months, we're going to be looking to all those trade-offs, and we'll certainly be before you prior to going to the public to examine what those trade-offs are and some concepts that we can bring forward for the public to consider. Our project schedule is certainly here in the month of fall, or September, October, November. We're going to be spending these couple months trying to do our stakeholder outreach. We'll be going to the BAC as well as the PAG. I'll be engaging with some stakeholders along that area, more importantly, the co-op as well as the church. Those are 2 large commercial facilities that are along my stretch. From January 22, we'll be going out to public outreach, but before we do the public outreach, we'll be before you. And in spring of 2022, we anticipate adoption of the preferred alternative. This concludes our presentation. We'll stand for questions.
Any questions for Brooke or Zach?
No, I just have a question. I know that you've identified Franklin as an east-west pedestrian and bike corridor, enhanced corridor. And that's kind of where the 2 jurisdictions come across. So I just want to sort of say, you have to anticipate what kind of facility is going to be on Franklin in order to cross. I don't want us to see a lot of investment in that intersection if in fact it's going to look different on the east-west. And so I would invite both CCDC and ACHD to develop temporary installations that might address those without pouring the concrete and then taking out the concrete, because that Franklin corridor is really important, east-west, because of obviously, well, for all the reasons you know already, and that we will be investing in that in the future. And I just hate to see something either impair that or torn up in the future in order to make it.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. And yes, that is a consideration as we put forward this project, is what we're going to do with Franklin and kind of ensuring the continuity that we have between the 2 bike facilities. So that is already something in which we're taking into account.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Zach, Brooke, this is super exciting. Just want to say thank you so much for all of the work that you've done. CCDC allowing us to catch up. This is just really exciting. Love seeing the alignment and leveraging of our resources and expertise. I just want to say I really appreciate you all trying to keep a similar theme throughout the corridor in terms of treatment or protection and separation with the bike lane. So I think that's really exciting, and plus having that length of a corridor would also hopefully, I think, down the road, give us some insight as to, are more people using it because it's longer and more connected, and how are they connecting to that? So of course it's for another meeting and down the road, but I just think that sets us up to be able to truly evaluate how beneficial or safe this type of treatment is. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Are there any other questions? Thanks to both of you.
Thank you very much.
And before we begin our item number 2, I would like you to know that Alexis is going to have to leave soon. She has an important introduction to make at the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance Conference. And so she won't be here during that time and maybe won't come back, who knows? All right. So item number 2 is Rose Hill Street and Owyhee Street concept study update.
You're not sharing.
Uh-oh.
I'm getting there, I'm getting there.
We try to get everyone to share in this agency.
Perfect. Love it.
Okay. All right, and Christy, you're on.
Mr. President, do you want me to wait for Commissioner McKinney to return, or?
Could be a while. No,
Could be.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, we can go ahead and wait.
Jeez.
You left the door wide open.
Oh my goodness.
It was a setup. It's a setup. It's a setup entirely.
I'd prefer you to go.
Go. Okay, sorry about that. I thought it was day. Mr. President, Commissioners, good afternoon. I'm Christy Enselman with I'm a senior transportation planner here at Ada County Highway District. And I'm here to present to you on the Rose Hill and Owyhee Street concept study and the summary of that process that we've done. So if you recall, we're looking specifically at the intersection of Rose Hill and Owyhee Street. The goal of this concept study was to enhance the intersection safety for those that walk and bike. That was the original goal of this project. The alternatives that we'll be looking at today are a mini roundabout and an enhanced pedestrian crossing. And the enhanced pedestrian crossing includes bulb outs. So just a review of our public outreach efforts to date. We held significant amount of stakeholder meetings, March 15th through the 31st. And that was neighborhood residents, school representatives, as well as a neighborhood group in the area. We held an online survey March 22nd through April 5th, and we had a wonderful response. We had 263 respondents, with 83% of those live in the neighborhood, which is great. We love to see that kind of response to our online surveys. We then held a public involvement meeting on July 22nd to go over those concepts that our consulting firm came up with. We had 20 attendees. This did not include ACHD staff. Then we held another online survey, July 22nd through August 5th, where we received 24 respondents, and 72% of those were living in the neighborhood. Overall, we heard from the public, 68% felt that there was definitely a need for improvements at the intersection for those that walk and bike. And just overall, our project webpage received over 400 visits during this process, which again is a great turnout. So project considerations through this process, what we heard from the public was that the intersection needed safer crossing conditions for people walking and biking. Rose Hill is a busy arterial roadway, and it's kind of unique in that it has front-on residential housing and a lot of attractors in the area with parks and schools in that vicinity, in that immediate vicinity, including it's a walk route for one of the schools there. They wanted to see increased visibility for that crossing with better sight distance around the intersection. We also heard from the original public outreach that speeding was an issue along that corridor, as well as turning movements, both onto and off of Rose Hill from Owyhee Street. Currently programmed in the 5-year work plan, we have designs slated for 22, right-of-way in 23, and construction of the project in 24. So we have consecutive years, which is great to see. There was a request for a full corridor review of Rose Hill, and the project team recommendation, and that project team includes ACHD staff, City of Boise, as well as Boise School District, felt that there was an immediate need for improvements at that intersection for those that walk and bike. So we would look to come back to the commission and do another concept study for a future corridor of Rose Hill. But the immediate need of the intersection, we felt it was imperative to move forward with this as is.
Christy, so the public didn't get to really weigh in on whether or not they would prefer a full corridor study or just traffic calming at this intersection. Is that correct?
Mr. President, Commissioner I almost did it every time. Commissioner Pickering, yes, I'm sorry. We didn't specifically ask that question. We asked them what their concerns were. So the original public outreach, we said, we know that there's an issue with this intersection, but what are your concerns? And that's where some raised the issue of some speeding, as well as turning movements at the intersection. But no, we didn't ask a specific question because of the uniqueness of this corridor in that it's a residential arterial with front-on housing, on-street parking, which is not normal for an arterial, and the volume that carries. The type of concept study we would need to do would be fairly involved. It would be a much larger effort than what we've done specifically for this intersection. That's why the consideration from our project team was that we will come back with a future corridor, but this is an immediate need.
Thank you.
So the concepts that our consulting firm came back with, and our project team, concept number 1 is an enhanced crossing, which would be bulb outs on all 4 corners. RRFB, which is the rectangular rapid flashing beacon on the Rose Hill legs. And then the installation of bike push buttons, because Owyhee will be a future bike corridor. So we wanted to make sure we had those in place when we do that next stage of the bike. Concept option number 2 was a mini roundabout at the intersection. And this is a mini roundabout. It functions exactly like a regular roundabout, but the impacts to the adjacent properties are significantly reduced. And the center median is a mountable median, but this would also include RRFBs on all 4 corners. So the public outreach results, after those concepts were presented, you see it's fairly evenly matched between the two, with the enhanced pedestrian crossing and bulb outs edging out the mini roundabout just slightly. We did hear from the public that the mini roundabout, there were more people that said definitely not. That's fairly typical when we do an outreach on roundabouts. Just a lot of people that don't have them in their area and have never used one. We tend to get some hesitancy from the public on those types. So the draft recommendation that the project team originally were coming to you with was for the enhanced pedestrian crossing with the bulb outs. And the total cost is there on the screen of $435,000. However, you'll see that however on the bottom there. There have been some recent concerns that have been brought regarding bus turning movements and bulb outs at an intersection. When we originally went through this process, and we do coordinate with the school district, and they are on the project team, Owyhee was not part of their busing route, so this wasn't a concern originally. However, recently, this school year, they did add some bus routes on Owyhee, so there are buses now that would be turning onto Owyhee for some specialized programs. So we had our consulting firm run some turning movements with the bulb outs, and the red circles there you can see for a bus to turn from Rose Hill onto Owyhee and vice versa, there would be tracking of the school bus into the left turn lane, which is not a desirable outcome when we have buses turning on there. So because of that, staff's recommendation is, or not staff's recommendation, project team and the concept study recommendation would be for the mini roundabout. They did turning movements on the mini roundabout. Originally, when we went through this process, what you're seeing there is a fire truck, but the dimensions of the fire truck and the school bus are almost identical. And it does make those turning movements just fine. It doesn't track over because we do have that mountable center turn or center median there at the intersection. And this is also desirable as well because it does address some of those concerns with speeding with turning movements for Owyhee, but it also gives that much more visible crossing distance for our pedestrians and cyclists. So the recommended, therefore, the revised recommended alternative would be for the mini roundabout at the intersection of Rose Hill and Owyhee. And the benefits of this would be to increase pedestrian, bicycle, and motor vehicle safety. And this would be compatible with the adopted plans in the area. One of the other reasons too that the project team felt this was also a good fit was this intersection did have significant accident history on this corner with the vehicular traffic, and a lot of that was the turning movements, people trying to get onto and off of Rose Hill, site visibility. So there were some issues at this intersection. So moving forward with the next step for this in the process, we'll have another comment period. And it starts today. It'll go through when we come back to you on October 27th. We'll have those concepts out to the public to hear what they have to say about the recommendation, if they have any concerns. And we'll come back to you on October 27th for adoption of the preferred alternative. And I will stand for any questions.
Mr. President, so I have to go in a couple minutes. Let me chime in. So I am really excited about the mini roundabout concept, in part because in my district, I've heard a lot about this idea from neighbors, really trying to test it out and seeing how it's worked in other communities outside of Ada County. So just really thankful for your thoroughness with Boise School District and making sure that that's going to be a safe intersection. So I just really applaud you for integrating that type of design in this process. And then I'm just kind of curious, I don't have time to listen to the discussion, but I just wanted to plant a seed. I'm just a little concerned about, I understand not having the corridor not listed here because obviously time and resources, I understand that completely. But I'm also worried that we might truly not see a really as big of an impact in terms of true traffic calming if we didn't include a bigger portion of that corridor in this project. So I'm sorry to miss the discussion to learn more about what you think about that and all of that sort of thing, but that's just a concern that I have. So great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Pickering, and thank you for coming when we talked with the neighborhood. And this is something I'm going to ask the commission that we not schedule this for a hearing, that we actually move into integrating this into corridor planning. Mostly because we've already been bitten by this dog once. When we built the Shoshone Bikeway and built a crossing. And it came to my attention on the walks through the neighborhoods that in fact that crossing isn't as safe, not because the crossing design itself, but the way in which drivers approach it from vista, visibility, speeds, they approach it, and therefore people don't feel safe at that brand new crossing at the Shoshone Bikeway. And I think I understand, the tendency is to want to do things in specific chunks, but we have to view the uniqueness of this corridor. People are very concerned because if you've all driven on it, it's Franklin Road, busy road, that then curves down and goes, basically it's been connected to an old residential road, so we call it a arterial. And speeding is a big issue, and I'm looking at what are the public's concerns. They say vehicles are not yielding, they don't see people. If you're out there, and Commissioner Pickering and I walked it back in May, and Christy and the director and Cynthia Gibson, we walked it like in June, early June. So we sort of saw and experienced in a little tiny way what the neighbors are experiencing. Number one concern is people are driving on that, they're not paying attention. It changes dramatically from over by Fred Meyer and the other side of Orchard, and then curves around and then changes names and becomes Rose Hill and then connects to downtown. But drivers don't change because there's nothing in the road to tell them they need to change focus on this road. And I have a huge concern because of past experience where we put a mini roundabout or traffic circle or whatever it was on Northview. There's huge public pushback when we try something new. We put a lot of money into something, and there's going to be huge public pushback to trying something new on something that is going to be so abrupt. There's nothing else to the west of Owyhee that tells people they're in a neighborhood, they need to slow down, they need to focus differently. And then they get to this intersection, and it's going to be, so whether it's a curb extensions at one and at no others, or a traffic circle. So I think we've done good. We've gotten something for the shelf. And we now need to put all the resources that would otherwise be spent trying to process this particular area and really engage the neighbors in some traffic calming on Rose Hill. And perhaps, well, definitely we can phase them in. We can do some things with temporary installations to extend the curbs with chicanes and so forth. west of Owyhee, the road is quite wide and has a center turning lane that just continues on, and that's part of it. Not a lot of people park on there, even though there is space for parking, so you can kind of imagine it's quite wide. The need for traffic calming, frankly, is much stronger here than it is on 13th, but we are moving forward, spending a lot of good money on 13th, and it's needed, and it's been in the works for a long time. But I have a deep concern and would ask us to be much more intentional about integrating this into the corridor. Put our resources into that and not try and push just because, you know, this is how we've approached the public. We asked them about the intersection, and the data we collected, while it told us about speeding and people don't see us, the experience is it's a corridor. The corridor needs to be addressed. We've never really addressed it. And the problems that have arisen around Shoshone are going to arise around Owyhee. We can address some of these by calming traffic with temporary installations and start people to realize that this road is going to change as we continue to study the best concepts. But I really would oppose putting this on the agenda and saying we're going to pick these two things and then we're going to move forward with spending money. I would say spend no more money on this particular intersection. Let's put all of that into moving forward on the corridor. I think it's really, really important that we listen to people more than just what we had. It's a little like saying, you know, okay, here's your two options for knee replacement. We'll get to your osteoporosis and the issues with your bones at some other date in the future. But right now, let's fix your knee. And I'm thinking, you really have to deal with them together. And Shoshone has demonstrated that, you know, while there's good pieces to it, it doesn't work. It doesn't entirely work as what the neighbors have told me, the people who live there and go back and forth all the time. It doesn't quite work, and we should have addressed Rose Hill as a corridor when we were doing that. So we should learn from that lesson. So that's what I would request.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Mr. President. Percy, so I really am concerned about the feedback we've heard from Commissioner Pickering and Commissioner Hansen. One does feed into the other there. It is a big change. Another thing that I've gotten a lot of feedback on, you have an older population up there. A lot of people have been in their homes since the 50s, and so it is going to be a change. Is there any, what is the real downside to doing some of these temporary traffic calming structures out there as we move forward that he's talking about? I mean, putting safety first. I mean, talk to me about your feelings on this, the feedback you've gotten. What would be the downside to doing that, to just pushing the pause button, looking at the whole corridor as one when we're going in there?
Mr. President, Commissioner May, I mean, that's why I'm here. It's a commission's discretion. If you want to press the pause button as a commission, we can certainly do that. What we heard from the project team, which included the city of Boise, because we specifically asked this question: should we pause? Should we wait? Should we come back and do the full corridor? And it was a consensus of project team, which includes the city of Boise as well as the school district, because this is a walk route to the school, that this was an immediate need to get this intersection improved. And then, and not wait and then do a concept, but do a concept and this can be incorporated in that. As far as temporary installations, we can that's certainly something, if that is again the commission's direction, we can do that.
I think it bears discussion. I really do. If we could perhaps push the pause button, take a broader look while we're in there, rather than come back. I mean, what's the timeline on this? You say it would be a much more involved study and time commitment. What are we talking?
Mr. President, Commissioner May, that'd likely be another year, because we would have to go back out to the public. It's a much larger outreach effort to do the corridor than this type of an intersection project, but it likely would be another year of work on a concept study.
So maybe we could incorporate some sort of temporary type of calming, traffic calming, or I just think it's more beneficial It might take a little bit more time, but I think going in one time, getting it right, and one does feed into the other. And I think so there's some significant and really relevant concerns about doing that. So I would like to hear what the other commissioners have to say.
I'll interject then. I heard from a few people, none of whom were in the neighborhood, but all of whom were calling about relatives that lived in the neighborhood. And they basically said, we don't want you to do this till our parents are dead. Because they can't negotiate a mini roundabout. So I don't really have any opinions about the rest of the corridor because I got such strange responses from others about just this little project.
Well, let me, first of all, I do have some questions on the physical characteristics of the proposal. So if we could go back one slide. There you go. So it looks like what we have are on-street bicycle lanes with ramps that then transition onto the sidewalk. Is that correct?
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, yes. I mean, currently there are no bike lanes on Rose Hill.
Okay.
So the cyclists can either choose to take the existing sidewalk or they can take the street. So coming into that, they can either exit or they can take the roundabout.
Okay. And just to clarify, nobody cycles on that street. They only cycle on the sidewalk. It's too dangerous. It's true. Cars are going way too fast. So they're only cycling on the sidewalk.
Many years ago.
And everybody we saw cycled.
It's been bad for years. It's been bad for years.
They only cycle on the sidewalk. And even then they're attached. They're not detached like on 13. So they're attached, and that feels scary. So I'm sure a lot of parents prohibit their. Well, so, but. So then I'm confused. It looks like then if nobody cycles on the street and we don't have striped bike lanes on the street, why then do we have ramps leading from what appear to be the space for bike lanes onto the sidewalk? That's kind of.
And Mr. President, it's a standard design for that if we don't have the bike lanes. That through design, that can be evaluated and removed if it's not necessary to have those there.
Okay, and then it appears then that going in all four directions, well, let's see, north and south, the sidewalk ends, and this project includes new curb and gutter extending north and south on both sides of the street. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is it currently no curb and gutter on that street at all?
On the Owyhee street legs, there's no curb gutter and sidewalk. Those are some future sidewalk projects and bikeway projects that we're going to be bringing forward.
Okay.
To connect that both to the north and to the south, but currently, no, they do not exist.
Okay, and then I'm looking at the crosswalks, and of course, the crosswalk locations are pulled back from the roundabout a little bit. It looks like there's additional crosswalk striping in the middle of the roundabout. Is that just an artifact, or is that really going to be there?
Commissioner McKinney, when they did the concept, they layered that over the top of the existing intersection.
Okay.
So what you're seeing is that existing infrastructure, the existing crosswalks, those would not be there
All right.
when the roundabout was reconstructed.
Commissioner McKinney,
So
I'm
just
gonna have to.
ignore the phantom crossing marks.
Am I not talking loud enough?
Yeah, you're not talking and you're putting your hands on your mouth, which actually really hinders. Thank you.
So then, let's see. All right. Well, let me give my thoughts on this. I think it would be a mistake to slow this down. I think we ought to move forward, having talked to the neighborhood and gotten their input. I also like the mini roundabout concept because the nice thing about a mini roundabout is that the learning curve for the driving public is almost nil. A two-lane roundabout, you have to know a little bit more about negotiating it. But for a one-lane roundabout, everyone could just automatically deal with that. That's just a right turn and another right turn. And I don't see, and the nice thing about a roundabout is that by itself, it is a traffic calming feature. Roundabouts automatically slow the traffic. And the bulb outs of the sidewalks, along with those center medians, will have the same effect. And if additional traffic calming is needed, you know, we can deal with that. But I prefer to take things in chunks, deal with the problem at hand. And if there are other issues, like you want to have a concept study, okay, let's deal with that. But we've got something here that's in front of us that I think makes a lot of sense and solves the problem that's right in front of us now. And we can integrate it into whatever is done elsewhere on the corridor that our corridor study might show. So I would not be in favor of, kicking this down the road. I'd say if we're set up to move forward on it, let's do it.
What is the start time on this, Christy? As scheduled?
Mr. President, Commissioner May, we have this scheduled for design. It's actually part of a contract that we're looking to go out for like immediately. We already have some people online. So it's designed in 22, right of way in 23, and construction in 2024. So yes, quickly on this one.
Yeah, I don't see a good reason to wait, because even though, we want to look at other corridor issues, and traffic calming is certainly a part of it. And I would say let's consider, as we go into design, do we really need those bike ramps, or does that not fit? So there are design adjustments that can be made in design, but the overall concept, I think we ought to go forward.
I do, kudos to you and your team in taking into account with the turning. That's something that just doesn't readily come to mind. So I like the adjustment, and I like the new concept here of the roundabout. They are just so close. If we can make some type of minor adjustments, and I don't know, but I just, and it speaks to our go in once, get it done. But they're just so close to one another, and to just have to do one and then go back in later, it would be a shame. There was just a way. That's why I was asking about if there a significant downside to waiting a little bit, but maybe we can accelerate the corridor study and make sure that they maybe are being done in tandem with this one going forward. I just don't want to see a big gap in between, so I'm sensitive to what
I want to see us move forward.
Right.
90% of the problem of this intersection, 90% of the problem of this intersection is the speed with which drivers approach it. And some of them are turning.
On Rose Hill.
On Rose Hill.
Yeah, it is bad.
Rose Hill is the main road. And so we can't pretend that the speed with which people approach it, and we're going to calm that speed at one intersection. The problem of speed starts when the westbound starts off of Vista, and we run into that problem at the very first at the crossing at Shoshone. They accelerate past that because the road is so wide. Once they get past this, they accelerate even more. Coming the other direction, it's even more of a problem when they come past Roosevelt. So you have these very long, we are telling drivers, drive as fast as you want, this is what the conditions are. And then boom, you stick a feature in there that slows them down. They need to be slowed down to the posted speed limit long before they approach this intersection. Because otherwise what we will end up doing is not one and done, it will be done, okay, there's errors, there's mistakes, but frankly, we don't have the money, we can't come back here again, we're gonna have to go off to other areas of the county. Let's spend our money wisely and put all of our resources, don't go out for a contract, don't start this process, put all of the resources that we can into developing traffic calming, temporary, and then ultimately something more permanent that's fully integrated with this intersection. We can slow traffic at this intersection with temporary measures. I want us to see us do this corridor right. And frankly, the feedback I've gotten from the neighborhood association is a sense of powerlessness. This is what we said. We told you about our osteoporosis, and you came back and said, this is how I'm going to fix your knee. And so what we need to do is come back and tell them about the systemic approach. I know it's hard. I know it's complicated. I know it's different than every other arterial, but that we can do it. I think we can do it, and we have the tools. We have the ability to measure level of traffic stress. Now we can actually integrate that more, and we can use temporary measures to test things. And frankly, the neighborhood would get excited about testing it in one area and another. There are quite a number of other cross streets that people cross at. There's some apartment complexes to the west and one rental units to the east. There's even a couple of little commercial operations along this place because it's a funky old neighborhood with driveway access. So there's opportunities to do things right, and I really object to moving forward, with just saying this is the only place we're going to do it, and then sometime in the distant future we'll do some concept. The ultimate problem, the core problem, people have identified it, is the speeding on Rose Hill and everything associated with that. Visibility, being able to react to children crossing the street, not yielding because they're going too fast. And when your street tells you you can drive as fast as you want, you don't have to focus on the people, they don't. Believe me, they don't. And they turn and it's like, oh my God. That's why it's really tragic that we built that crosswalk at Shoshone on the other side of the canal, because you're approaching that intersection fast. They turn over the canal. It's not even right there on the street, and that's where the crosswalk is. But that's because we didn't approach that. And I'll beat myself up on that because I wasn't as aggressive as I should have been when we were evaluating the Shoshone Bikeway and investing in that. We should have. And now it's a problem that we have to fix. So I'm asking you not move forward with this, but put the resources into as soon as we can, as soon as possible. This is a priority for this neighborhood. And as you've seen when I've submitted my priorities on the integrated 5-year work plan, Rose Hill is one of the priorities. So please move forward on that.
What's the fix?
Commissioners, thank you. As always, this is the purpose of these work sessions, is to have these conversations and get your feedback, so thank you very much. We are glad to take your direction. Certainly, we need to know how you want to move forward on this specific project. If it is the will of the majority of the commission to pause, we can certainly do that, and we would prefer not to bring you something that you aren't interested in adopting. That's never our intention. That being said, the timing of a more comprehensive look at Rose Hill, as was discussed today, Rose Hill is a complicated corridor. And there are a lot of property owners who live along that corridor who are going to have a lot of interest in any decisions that you decide to make on how to reconfigure that corridor. We would anticipate a significant public involvement and outreach effort would be required to seek that feedback, to gather all of that information so that we could bring it back to you with a legitimate conversation and that iteration that you want with the public. We also, with regards to temporary installations, we don't just go out and start putting things down. Those things have to be thought through. Yeah. And we would prefer to think those things through with the neighborhood, as part of a concept effort where we come up with some ideas, and we've talked about this, of including some of those as part of a concept effort. So if it's the commission's expectations that we can basically pivot and have that happen in 22, we don't have the staff resources. There's been no money allocated to that effort in 22, and it's going to be a substantial effort. So if we are going to pause, which is at the commission's direction, I want to be clear that you're not thinking, well, we're automatically going to go run out and start a project on the whole corridor.
Right. No, I think we all understand that, and are certainly tuned into that. But just the expectation that if this were to go back out, you would anticipate a large involvement and communication with the neighborhood, I think speaks to the fact that this is really important in a larger issue than maybe perhaps we thought of initially. So I think that kind of supports perhaps pushing the pause button a little bit, and then maybe we can accelerate. And I know I've asked before how many shelf projects we have. Maybe if we're short-staffed and we don't have the resources right now, this is a great project. It's important. It needs to go forward. Perhaps some of those other projects maybe remain on the shelf, or we step back from those and put more resources into something like this, so we can get a little closer to maybe a true acceleration of this. And I can hear sighing and heavy breaths across the room, but it's worth doing right to go in. And if we think we're going to get that type of response, I think that might be an indicator that perhaps we may need to slow down and make sure we do it right and look at it as a whole, because one does feed into the other, so. Alexis?
Oh, I just wanted to see what Justin had to say to that, if that's all right.
Oh, yeah, Commissioners, as I stated, we're here to, we have work sessions to seek your direction. If that's the intent of the commission, we would want to come back to you through the integrated 5-year work plan process to propose timing on an overall approach on Rose Hill. We've been, there's a lot of corridors that have been identified in the last, let's say, 6 months that all are priorities, and we understand that. But we have to, ultimately there's resources available to do these types of efforts, and it's not just the dollars and cents, it's the staff time and all the other things that it takes to go out. We're talking about individual conversations with property owners who care a lot about what's going on, as has been mentioned, which takes a lot of effort and time. And I just want to have realistic expectations on, we're not able to do, a bunch of those every year with the staffing levels that we have right now.
So I would just suggest, in fact, on our walks, we spoke personally to some of those property owners who want to see this happen. The other is, and I understand the past has been, we don't approach commissioners about projects early in the stages in their own ideas from their own neighborhoods. We wait for the commissioners to come to us. And I would suggest this is an example that's changed. As you were thinking about this, as clearly it moved up on staff's sort of radar screen, and I feel like, it took me a lot of effort to try and get the attention of staff that there's an opportunity to recognize, there's relationships, there's some experience, there's some knowledge that each commissioner has in their own district. If you early on say, introduce us to those people who own property, introduce us to some of the players in that neighborhood, so we can be part of developing this. My fear is that by saying we'll pause, is that then no effort is made or little effort is made. I want all this money to be put, instead of to the constructing this as some specific design, into coming back to me and coming back to the neighbors who spoke to us. And you'll find others. Everybody has different ideas about what the fix should be, but the issue is the concerns that they have, and then we can work through some options. So I would ask that there be much more engagement with the commission, each commissioner in our districts, and with the relationships we have with the people out there. So then I think it would be a little less frustrating that the perception is that we haven't been heard when we were told these are the only options we can do, and it's going to cost too much, and it's really complicated. We know it's complicated. We want to help address that. We want to help participate in addressing the complexities so we can fix it.
I have a different question. Christy, and I'm sorry if you guys covered this while I was out, but could you describe, because you mentioned in your presentation just how, this type of treatment is unfamiliar to most people. So I totally understand some reservations around that. So has there been, and I know you've talked about temporary installations and all that good stuff, and I know that, like you said, you can't just go in and just do this. I'm sure you guys already talked about this, but could you provide some details as to what could a demo, a semi-permanent demo of this, is that possible, following the timeline that you've already prescribed in future years? Because I think that would also teach us to see, would this also work in other places down the road? So anyway, just what are your thoughts about that type of opportunity?
I will let Justin speak to that. He already took his mask off.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Commissioner, Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, it's a good question on something like this, what the viability of a temporary installation is. We have to get traffic engineers engaged to look at what the possibilities are. Remember, anything we do, we have to maintain ADA compliance. And so it's not simply just throwing out, some cones and things like that. We have to maintain ADA compliance. We have to ensure that not only pedestrians and cyclists, but also drivers understand what's happening out there, and the materials and all of the other items that we use have to meet certain standards. And so it's probably not a perfect answer to your question. Temporary installations are certainly a possibility we're exploring. Whether we could achieve a full functioning mini roundabout with a temporary installation at this specific location, I can't answer that without digging into that a little bit deeper.
I have a quick question. We installed a temporary traffic light over on, Black Cat, a number of places. I think there was a traffic light here at one point, wasn't there? Was there a temporary traffic light?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, there's never been a traffic signal there.
Oh, is this
There
not?
was the string line across where there was a flashing
Oh,
light
that's right.
at the intersection. Previously, that's the only treatment this intersection's had.
So if the complexity is such that it's gonna take a couple of years to really address in a way that's gonna be permanent, the speeding and the safety issues on Rose Hill. We have a traffic light over on Roosevelt, we have traffic light at Orchard. And we have done traffic lights for temporary periods of time because we can then reuse that equipment at some other location. And in fact, we might need that. I mean, the concern people have getting across is there's nothing to stop the traffic as it's going through. And so all kinds of, and I would consider a traffic light a temporary installation, but you know better. There's lots of other things we could do without spending the kind of money on concrete installations that would be extraordinarily expensive to change once we put them in.
I'll make my comment short and sweet. Out of more concern for the north-south traffic than for the east and west, because we can do relatively little for the east and west traffic. And for the fact that there are schools, there are kids, even though there are a lot of older people in the area. And the fact is that even a temporary signalized intersection is incredibly expensive. I would say let's go ahead and proceed with what the plans are right now with the mini roundabout solution.
And if we do that, I know the corridor study said future corridor study, then can we look at accelerating that, moving that up, so it's a little bit closer aligned? Rather than just have that
Certainly, if the commission wants to prioritize the Roosevelt corridor as a corridor that we want to absolutely go full speed ahead on, we can certainly do that. It may have implications on other corridors that have been discussed, but we can do that through our integrated five-year work plan process, which is currently underway. So what you would see potentially is a concept study for Roosevelt being accelerated into like 2023, but there would likely be some things in 2023 that may have to then drop out just because of the reality of funding and available resources at that time.
And I am serious about those shelf projects, because I know those are for when funding becomes available. So I think that might be a good alternative for us right now while we're experiencing this crunch. Put those, or let them sit on the shelf for a little bit longer, so that we don't pull off some of these projects that are priority. So, I am serious with that suggestion.
And Mr. President, Commissioners, if you say shelf project, if you're referencing a project that is designed with the right-of-way acquired that is sitting on the shelf, there's no shelf projects of that type on the shelf.
So, the Linda Road overpass was one that was brought to us as a shelf project. We've talked about shelf projects, and that's not to say that they're not worthy. I'm just saying if we do have, and then one discussion we had about staff, and maybe if I'm speaking incorrectly, Director Wong, you can jump in and correct me, but I thought we did have some shelf projects that we were hoping to start the process, and when funding became available, then move on them. I'm just saying, if there's some things that we can pull people off of, and maybe prioritize this.
And Mr. President, Commissioner May, thank you for clarifying that. That helps me understand.
Yeah.
I think it's just some semantics.
Just semantics.
We've talked a lot about developing a more robust shelf project list. Absolutely, that has been part of our discussion. And what I'm referencing is, if we were to delay some of that work that we're doing to develop some of those shelf projects and take those resources and emphasize some of these other corridors, I now see what you're saying.
I think we're talking about
the same thing. Yes, well, I'm totally with you, and I think I understand what you're saying. That's what would happen.
Yeah.
If we were to advance something like Rose Hill, some of those other projects that we've talked about advancing to prepare to get ready on the shelf would be delayed. That's exactly how it would work.
Okay, because we've all discussed the importance of this and safety first, et cetera. So doing that corridor study sooner rather than later, to me, would be a priority that we could then pause on the others and move this one up.
But Commissioner May, even if we want to accelerate the corridor study, I still don't think we should delay this project.
No, that's what I'm saying. If we go ahead with that, then, can we move that future corridor study up? And then he said we could accelerate that, but we might have to recalibrate and move things around. So that's when I went to the shelf projects that we now have figured out what we're both talking about.
Right, so let's move this one, let's keep this one moving along and
accelerate
then
that
come back
corridor
and talk
study.
about how we can accelerate or adjust other things according to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think
That's gonna be part of our integrated 5-year work plan discussion, for sure.
So Commissioner May, I was taking your thoughts as delaying this. Christy, can you go back to the slide where you had the years on, like, what would happen each year?
Oh, so it's Commissioner Pickering, it's designed for this in 22. Oh, I went way too far. Design in 22, right-of-way acquisition in 23, and construction in 24. I gotta find it.
I guess
There it is.
my more, because I agree with Commissioner May, as we have, because again, semantics, we've got some projects that have some design elements, right, but we don't have the purchase right away, we don't have all of those other steps that we're gonna be pursuing down the road if we do give this the green light. So my question is, if we press pause on this, can there be another project that we have paused previously or that we have listed on the integrated 5-year work plan as a priority? Can that be kind of put into the queue in terms of these stages that this project would have gone through in the next 3 or 4 years? Does that make sense?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, yeah, that would be fleshed out through the integrated 5-year work plan process as we reprogram, if we're directed to reprogram the current schedule on a project like this. Other things would move around. I wish I could tell you it's an exact trade. It's almost never an exact trade.
Yeah,
It's
I understand
things, it's a large county, we have
Sure,
projects all over.
we know that.
So there's
Yeah.
and so it doesn't exactly work as an exact trade, but certainly things move around and shuffle. And could something potentially move forward and this slide back? Yes, that's part of the programming process. But to be clear, this is on a pretty aggressive schedule right now, where you go from a concept, you would potentially be making a decision at the end of this month. We would be moving into design this year, basically, as soon as you adopt the concept study, we have then the professional consultant on board to do the design, and then we move in, there'd be some right-of-way acquisition, and then we're moving into construction. So that's pretty aggressive. If the commission is wanting to see a larger picture of what's happening on the corridor, I certainly wouldn't want us to move into design if there's still uncertainty about the Rose Hill as a corridor.
So I think just so the commission knows, kind of that's where my head's at is, although I get a little heartburn at the thought of delaying this kind of intersection because I know the need is there.
Yeah, right.
I really do feel that. And I hate this. We're in conversations about this all the time, like pursuit of perfection and all of this goodness and time and delay and money, or do we kind of just go after the thing that we can in the time that we have? And it's just such a hard trade-off, and I feel the pinch right now with this. So I just want to say I don't envy any of us in this, but I just think with just being on that walk with the residents, and of course I'm gonna lean on the commissioner with that district and what they would like to see the most, and I just think I would like to see it be paused or at least delayed a little bit to incorporate more elements as staff time can allow it to be, to incorporate more details in the corridor and have that influence some of the entire project. So that's my take.
Yeah, unless we're going to put the money that would be spent on this in the bank, which I assume we're not, there's really no way we can use it to accelerate the corridor projects, because that's going to take some time with the 5-year work plan process. So unless there is a project within the city of Boise and on their priorities that we could do this sort of thing too in the same timetable, I think we're fooling ourselves if we don't go ahead with this project.
And I think if I may, it's worth noting that the reason we're looking at this right now is because this project has already been prioritized as being very needed.
Yeah, it is.
So I'm gonna suggest its reason is because it's easier than the corridor.
Right.
And that we move things forward because they're easier. And we've made that mistake at Shoshone. And I don't say, let's pause, let's integrate. We see this big chunk of money that we're gonna spend on design and construction and current right-of-way, which is, it's sort of mind-boggling to me that we would need right-of-way. That corridor is way too wide as it is. I'm sure there's plenty of room existing right now. I think this points up an issue, instead of just kicking it down the road and saying, let's deal with the corridor some other time. We saw this on Surprise Way. You know, there's too many places where we go for the easier one because it's not as complicated, and we end up not addressing the bigger one. And frankly, we're
Jim, just as a
Jumping
devil's
over
advocate,
dollars.
so with that being said, I mean, realistically, we wouldn't be able to actually put money towards this corridor to do the harder, better thing. Like, it would be maybe 10 years, 8 years. Yeah, so I mean, are you okay with that type of trade-off?
You know, we can make this intersection, and we can put things on this corridor to slow traffic, which is 90% of the reason why this intersection is not as safe, and the other intersections, frankly, that don't have traffic lights. We can put some resources into that to slow the traffic down, so that it drives, people recognize where they're driving. And I think then we view that corridor. And I don't think it's gonna take, millions of dollars to do that. The Kootenai project was huge. I think this would be, maybe half of that. And we can phase it just like Kootenai. But I'm gonna continue to raise issues if our approach is to look at just these isolated things, and then the reason we move forward on these instead of the more complicated is because, well, you're gonna take money from here and here and here and here. We've got this list of 400 some projects. We have to approach this corridor. I think the neighborhood has spoken to us about this corridor for so long. And while we recognize that this need is where it hurts the most, there's osteoporosis on that whole corridor, and we cannot keep waiting. And in fact, the experience, I don't know if any of you were out on Northview when we put traffic circles up there years and years ago, and they're gone. Because you got a lot of, you guys are gonna get the political pressure because you're outside of the district, and they'll say, oh, why are you doing this for people who commute on that corridor? And it's like, well, it's because you're going 50 miles an hour until you hit that intersection. And then you're really upset because you have to.
Well, I'm glad, I think this
So
is the
that's what I
benefit
think.
of these work sessions, to have these relaxed discussions, going forward. So is there a way to your point and to Commissioner McKinney's point, this is a excellent project and it is needed, and you just cringe thinking, oh, are we gonna, put that off the table? So is there a way to go forward with this, accelerate that corridor study, and then perhaps, I think you brought it up, Commissioner McKinney, do some sort of temporary traffic calming, traffic signal or something, in the interim?
The traffic signal will cost half of what this project is going to cost anyway. Those things are like $250,000 to install.
But we were talking about some sort of demo type.
Yeah, and Mr.
Folks, what we have here is a golden opportunity to say one word, and if 3 people say it, we're done. And that's pause. You wanna pause? Do you wanna pause?
Pause.
You wanna pause?
Yes.
We're done.
No.
Right, you don't and I don't, but 3 do, so we're done. Let's go on to, item number 3.
Well, I think that
Because we cannot solve the rest of the problems now, that's not the reason for this work session.
I know, but it's hard to come in and have, new things thrown out that are really gonna make an impact. And so I don't think we're trying to
Yeah, I think
stall
We're
anything.
taking a lot of time trying to do
But
something
it's a
we're not
big
here to
deal.
do.
It's a big project.
Then-
Staff's
then
done an
maybe we
amazing
should
job.
have another meeting on it, but that's not what we're here for today.
Maybe we should.
We'll have another meeting on the corridor, and I think what I'd like to do is kind of like the Warm Springs folks when they came in East End. They came and spoke to us about the corridor and recognizing that there's a high priority segment of that Warm Springs corridor, and then they would suggest phasing the other two in, and then rather than just deal with one crossing on Warm Springs, and so we're gonna go on a walk.
Okay, so we've just talked about pausing it. So then
we
what?
pause.
What
We
pause
do-
for what?
We do nothing. That's
I
what
know we
pause
do, I
is.
know we do nothing, but what are we looking at? I
Pause to then
mean, you said
prioritize
10 years, what?
Well,
what-
it's just if I
Yeah,
can.
no, but I think we need to understand the implications of doing it.
If I can,
I'm sorry.
Commissioners, just some ideas for your consideration as we work through this. One option, and I just spoke about with the director, Christie also mentioned this, maybe if we do have a consultant under contract and we move forward on this mini roundabout design, we could add into that contract a look at some temporary measures along the corridor. So we're basically would be designing and working on furthering work at this intersection and then looking at some potential temporary installations along Rose Hill that could be explored in tandem as part of this effort. We would have an engineer under contract to help us with that work. It'll increase the cost of this project, but it will allow us to explore some of those other options. I'm not promising a full public involvement effort and the whole concept study, but at least there could be at some other key locations, we could look at some modifications using temporary installations in coordination with this to maybe start to get a feel for that. And then maybe from there, we could step into a concept effort once the public has had a chance to see some of that work. And we could say, this is, we could go a little deeper before we make the permanent decision on reconfiguring the entire corridor, looking at parking removal, adding this, adding that, which always comes up during those concept studies. So it's a potential idea for you to consider going forward.
I think that makes good sense.
Well, that's the first best thing
And
I've
I
heard
think-
today.
Well, I think I kind of nod to my horn, and I think that's what I
think that's what we were asking
I think
for
that's
all
what
along.
we were, yes.
And so before
It's
we
my
take
fault.
Justin.
Commissioners,
It's always
it's totally my fault. I am slow on the uptake. There's no doubt about that.
The mask
There's
is
no doubt
causing me
about
to
that.
lose
No,
oxygen.
that's
So-
not it,
So before we take this to the public, have these guys come up and tell us what kind of things they can deal with.
Well,
No, I think that's what we were trying to say, that we didn't want to just take it off, but we wanted to accelerate and maybe do something in the interim, and thank you very much, Director, thank you.
And I just want to add that's my idea too, come on.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do that and go on to number 3.
So it's not on the agenda for the 27th, because we have to have something different to take.
Well, actually, Commissioners,
Should not be on the public.
I would recommend that we could actually incorporate that direction into the concept report that would be before you on the 27th. That would be staff's recommendation. But if that's not what the commission would like to do, then.
I would ask for more specifics. It's just too loose, because it's
You can
not
come back to us.
a commitment back to that neighborhood saying, these are some of the concepts we're gonna incorporate. So I want to see that as part of the presentation at the public hearing, and so we can put that public hearing in January, whenever it takes for the consultant to put that in there. I don't wanna go to the public with what's already presented here, and then and we don't know what it is. So I really want some specificity. So I appreciate you coming up with a way of addressing the speeding on Rose Hill and an opportunity to invest in some temporary measures along that. Then bring it back to the commission in the new year with something more specific. And yeah, it might.
We've got a plan. Yeah.
Well, I do want to highlight, Mr. President, members of the commission, if we're not coming forward on the 27th, we're not going to initiate the design process on this project. And if there's a desire to go back out to the public and show them these temporary measures, as we've been discussing, before we even adopt the concept study for this roundabout, we're extending the process ultimately, and the odds of us being able to complete the design and move forward, as we've discussed, are going down rapidly. So I was trying to explain, moving forward on the 27th, you would be adopting this concept potentially at your discretion for this roundabout. We would incorporate into the document that you're adopting also the inclusion of other measures along the corridor that would be explored through the detailed design of this. And we would bring those back to you, and the public will have a chance to look at those as we go forward through that design process. It's just, if you want it all baked before we decide, then that's just going to push things back. So I hope that explains what I was discussing.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
I think that's good.
I
Can we
think-
go
I
on to
think
number
that
3
was our
now, or do
plan.
we need to argue about this?
No, I think we've got a plan.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And move forward.
Just know that if it seems half-baked and there's not that commitment, a linkage, if the public perceives it and I perceive that there really isn't this linkage between that there will be opposition on the 27th.
We're done.
We're gonna get it right. Okay.
Christie, number 3.
Keep going, Christie, you got it. Keep going.
I'm going.
Keep going.
You guys aren't tired of me up here yet?
But I think, well, while Christy, you're doing that, I just want to say, Justin, I really like this idea because, you know, potentially an entire corridor, it's like tons of options. It can be a little overwhelming. So I'm hopeful that maybe through this different process, we can kind of see what are some bite-sized chunks, right? And get people to think bigger about the entire corridor and give them kind of what they've been asking for, but not overwhelm them with a gazillion things, right? So anyway, very excited.
Yeah. Good job.
So my legs are getting a little sore. Apologies. So Commission, I am also here to talk to you about the Overland Road and Vista concept study and where we're at with that process. So I'm excited about this one as well. A reminder on this intersection, we have the Overland and Vista intersection, which has an existing, as we like to call it, a free-ish running right southbound on Vista Road that connects into Overland. The goal of this concept study was to enhance this intersection safety for those that walk, bike, and drive. So there is, for pedestrians to cross that free running right to get to the bus stop that's in the existing triangular piece right there, is a safety concern. Because there's all those residents along there, getting into and out of their homes is an issue. So that's what we were looking at. So the alternatives we were looking at were the removal of the free running right and relocation of the bus stop and replacing the free running right with a traditional right turn lane. So just a review of our public outreach efforts for this concept study. So it followed a very similar timeline to the Rose Hill Owyhee. We had stakeholder meetings March 15th through the 31st with residents, school representatives, business owners, Valley Regional Transit, and a neighborhood group. We held an online survey March 22nd through April 5th. Again, an amazing amount of respondents, 219, with 82 of them living in the neighborhood and surrounding areas. We held a public involvement meeting on June 17th where we had 17 attendees. Which followed another online survey, which was June 17th through July 1st. We had 13 respondents with 72% living in the neighborhood. Overall, the improvements, 60% agree that improvements are needed at that intersection for those that walk and bike, and 42% said there were improvements needed for those that drive. And although 42% is not 50, it is the majority of what we heard from the public at that intersection. And overall, 60% of those respondents ranked safety as the most important component at this intersection that we needed to address. So the project considerations for this intersection, based on the public outreach, was safer turning conditions for residents entering and leaving their homes. As I stated before, those are all residential homes on that corner, and it's been an issue for them getting in and out trying to turn into their homes. People think they're using the free running right, and they're not. There have been accidents on that free running right in conjunction with that. So we heard from them to remove it, get rid of it, replace it with a traditional turn lane. We also heard a request to relocate the bus stops to the south side of the intersection. Valley Regional Transit is on our project team, and they were completely supportive of relocating that to the south. That's actually their preferred location. It's just an older bus stop, that's why it's still there. And also we heard improved ped and bike facilities. The current crossing, like I said, of that turn lane is very hazardous for pedestrians and cyclists. So the timeline of this project, we have it slated for design in 24. No right-of-way is needed because we own it all. We own a very large chunk right there. And we have construction would be in the future. We just don't have a year yet. So concept option number 1, and these are going to look very similar between concept option number 1 and number 2, generally because there's not a lot that we can do here. So we just have some variation on this one. So concept number 1 improves all pedestrian ramps at all 4 corners of the intersection at Overland and Vista. Adjacent here is a wider sidewalk, so it's a 10-foot wide detached sidewalk where we can get it. The bus stop would be relocated south here of the intersection, and there would be 2 access points. We were removing one, so there'd be 1 access point for this resident, and then these residents would have a frontage road off of Overland. So we would remove a couple access points from that free running right location.
Would they be able to access the frontage road from the north on Vista? I hope not.
No. So concept option number 2 would remove all access to Vista Avenue for those residents right there where the free running right was. They would all access from Overland Road. It would reduce slightly this landscaped buffer. We give them a little turnaround, but also similarly to number 1, it improves all the pedestrian ramps on all 4 corners. This is a 10-foot wide detached sidewalk, relocation of the bus stop, and it would just have 1 access point rather than 2. So the preferred concept when we went out to the public was number 2, which was just the 1 access point off of Overland and providing that frontage roads to those residents. It gives them some nice separation. And then it's also replacing that with a traditional turn lane. I forgot to say that when I was talking about that. I apologize.
Christy, what did the 4 property owners there, what was their preference?
Funny you asked that, Commissioner Pickering. We actually, at one of those stakeholder meetings, it was quite wonderful. They came, one of the gentlemen came in with a drawing of this. He had already printed out an aerial and drew it and said, there you go. No, you don't need to do any work. So they were all supportive of a frontage road. They all would prefer this type of connection and to give them some removal from those very busy roadways. So they were all supportive of that. So as you can see, 84% satisfaction level of this concept, which is a very high. We'd love to see that. And the total cost to do this would be about $600,000. So next steps, comment period, 13th through the 27th. We come back to you for preferred adoption on October 27th, and I will stand for any questions. Hopefully this one was a much easier one.
Thank you very much. If I could just add, so if I could get the public to own my private driveway and maintain it, I'd love it. So I think we need to couple option 2 with a vacation. That we vacate that so that the property owners maintain. This is a driveway, don't fool ourselves, for 3 homes. The reason they need access is because they haven't gotten together and figured out access. The other people have an alley in the back. This is really, really, really old. This thing's existed for more than 50 years, probably 65 or 70 years. So it's been around for a long time. It's about time we get rid of these free running lanes, slip lanes, and not build any new ones, by the way. And I think it's really important that we lay down the principle that we don't, because otherwise some commission future is going to come and say, why did they get to have the public own their private driveway? And
because we forced them to have it.
And so I say we vacate, we integrate, and for the price of what we can get, we can offset some of the construction costs. Because, you know, this makes a whole lot of sense. There is no value whatsoever to the public to owning that land except for the sidewalk. So I say, let's couple it with a vacation process, and if we have to do it, it's not a top priority for the neighborhood, by the way. It's never risen to the neighborhood, either the Eco Bench or the Vista neighborhood, but this is like way up there. Yeah, they've all recognized this has existed since their grandparents lived there. But in terms of spending public money, you know, this neighborhood, let's deal with Nez Perce and the railroad crossings. And Depot, we already know what their priorities are. So I'd say push the design out if we have to, and that we couple it with a vacation of that land. In the meantime, they'll have plenty of time to get together and say, you know what, they're gonna vacate it anyway, let's figure out how to work together to get alley access.
And let's get together and figure out how we're gonna pay for the snow removal and everything else.
Totally.
Which I would hate to force on anyone.
Well, you know, I had thoughts along that line. It's you know, if we call it a frontage road or a shared driveway, you know, it could be considered either one. But if we're fixing a public roadway issue, which is what we're doing here, a public roadway problem, and the fix involves us telling the owners, you have to buy more property, that strikes me as a little problematic. On the, likewise, you have to buy more property and you have to maintain this. But on the other hand, if it's an ACHD frontage road, now you have a potential winter maintenance issue and just a general maintenance issue. And, you know, winter snowfall, this kind of a location would be a very low priority. And so it's effectively, you would be giving the owners all snow removal duties effectively here, no matter which way it goes. But I think the bigger question is, if we do vacate and say to these owners, you have to buy these properties, that may be a significant issue because, you know, they come back and say, yeah, I don't have $30,000 to pay for another, you know, 0.1 acres or something.
Yep.
Well, the reality is that if you look at this commercial development on the other three corners, unfortunately, well, I suppose the nature of the neighborhood has changed hands quite a number of times. And so I think making it clear that ACHD does not intend to be a private, to basically own private access land. In the future, it's down the road, give them plenty of time to know that we're gonna be vacating this eventually. And I just suggest we have the design and construction in the future rather than set it for 2024.
I'd suggest we go ahead with the plan as already presented. Thank you, Christie.
I agree.
I agree, Christy. This looks really good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christy.
All right, cool. Well, guys, we're through with our work sessions. Guess what? We can go home now.